I'm Gabrielle. I'm a course developer at Udacity, and I'm here with Ayaka Nonaka at AltConf. Ayaka, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I am an iOS developer at Workflow. I joined just 5 weeks ago, I guess almost 6 now. But before that, I was at Venmo, also as an iOS developer for 3 years. And before that, I was in college at Penn, back in the East Coast.
Cool. Yeah, Workflow won a design award last year, right?
Yeah, yep. I can't take credit for that, but yeah, it's still really cool.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah, what's an example of something you would do in Workflow?
Yeah, I think the one that I use the most is sending the last screenshot that I took on my phone to my computer. So, like, as a developer, I'm always like working on things. Sometimes I run my app and I find a bug and I want to like send that on Slack or like have it on my computer so I can like send it somewhere else. So I can just be like, oh, run this workflow and send the last screenshot to my computer, and I can just do stuff on my computer with the screenshot. So that one's pretty useful, and yeah, I think. And also another cool one is like, oh, can you call me an Uber to the next event on my calendar?
Oh,
so you
wow.
can do stuff like that. It's just really, really fun. And you can run it from like notification center, so you can just like drag down and like tap on the workflow and run it.
Nice. You don't have to enter the app or anything.
Exactly. Yep.
Very cool. Well, let's step back a little bit and talk about your journey as an engineer.
Yeah.
How did you get started in iOS development?
So iOS development, I guess it's kind of a funny story. So before I joined Venmo full-time in 2013, I interned at Venmo in 2010 after my freshman year.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I like first took like my intro CS class. I learned what like a linked list is and like maybe like what a task map is and stuff. And I was kind of scrambling during like the spring of my freshman year because it seemed like everyone else had internships or they like planned something out, and I was like, oh, I'm like the only one without an internship. So I went to this startup speed dating thing, and I somehow found Venmo, and I got there, and they're like, welcome, like your intern task is gonna be making something cool with the new like Venmo API that they're working on. So they were like, oh, we're thinking like maybe like an iOS app or an Android app, like which one do you want to work on? I was like, well, I guess I have an iPhone, so I guess I'll make an iOS app. So that's kind of how I decided to start doing iOS development.
And the rest
like
is history?
Yeah, like it could have been Android if I had an Android phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then since then I've been doing iOS development on and off.
Cool. Yeah. Was that the first? So that was the first iOS app you ever worked on?
Yeah, that was like the first like real project outside of like a school project I ever worked on. Yeah, so I didn't like start when I was like 10 or anything. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was after college or during college.
Is that when? And did you first start coding in college too?
Yeah, for the most part, I found computer science like near the end of my high school career. I applied for this 3-week program at Penn, which was like, I forgot what it was, SAST, Science, Technology, something. But yeah, it was a 3-week
like a
program.
Summer program?
Yeah, it was a summer program. And it was after my junior summer, I applied, and you could choose like which programs you're interested in, like which focus areas of engineering you're interested in. So I think I actually put like robotics as my first one because I was like, that sounds fun, like robots and everything. I put CS as like my second one, and I didn't think I got into the robotics one, but I got into the CS one. So that's also like, oh, this is how I started computer science. It's kind of arbitrary, but yeah, I'm happy where I ended up.
Nice. So 2010 was pretty early days for Venmo, right?
Yeah, it was really early days. I think we were like literally like 5 people in our like tiny office in Philadelphia. Yeah, it was before
Whoa,
Venmo. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was like all like IKEA furniture. Yeah, like, being at Workflow right now kind of reminds me of like the early days of Venmo too, because we're a total of 5 people in our office too.
Oh, really?
Like our entire company is, I guess, we're 4 in our office and then 5 total. Yeah.
Wow, that's tiny. Workflow is based in
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yep.
Okay.
We're on 4th and Brandon, so like really close to here.
Neat.
Yeah.
Neat. Do you like living in San Francisco?
So I live in Oakland, so I live right across the bridge. There's Barton every morning. Yeah, I love the Bay Area. I've been in the Bay for like 3 years now, but I'll probably be here for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it's fun being at the center, the tech center.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. Do you normally develop in Swift or Objective-C?
So I do both. So at Venmo, we started doing like, I still say we, I guess it's technically they now, but we started doing Swift like 100% like a few months back. And at Workflow, our code base is actually still all Objective-C in terms of our app, but we started writing Swift for like other things like automating tasks using scripting, which is what I actually gave a talk about at AltConf. But yeah, so we're starting with that and slowly like easing into like full-on Swift. But for me, I've been writing Swift since it came out.
What was it like what was your initial reaction when they announced it?
Yeah, it was really exciting. 2014 was the first time I actually got a ticket to WWDC. So I was sitting in the keynote in the room, and I remember when they like announced it, and there was like this like awkward silence of like people kind of like gasping and like choking on their own like breath. Yeah, but after that there was like a roaring applause.
That's so cool. Yeah, people were totally shocked.
Yeah,
we were like, what?
Like Objective-C's been around for like literally like 3 years or like something like that.
Decades.
Yeah, it was like ridiculous. Yeah. So and Swift is still like 2 years old. So like Objective-C is 31 years older than Swift.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Is there one that you prefer? Or I guess you're sort of switching between the two pretty,
I'm switching
pretty
between the two
consistently. What's that like?
At first, like when I started at Workflow, like my brain was used to Swift, so it was kind of difficult. But like after a few hours, I was like, okay, like I remember how this works. Yeah, but I prefer Swift. But I think like a lot of existing apps have Objective-C, and like we have to like learn to work with it too, so we can start using Swift. And a lot of the new features that were announced in Swift, like for 3.0 and even like Swift 2, were with respect to like backwards compatibility with Objective-C. So I think Apple knows that in order to get more people on Swift, like we need to make sure that it's very compatible with existing Objective-C apps. So existing apps can start adopting it. And so we can bring like the entire community along as opposed to just like people who are writing new apps that are like, that are still small and like have no Objective-C.
Yeah, we don't want to leave the Objective-C apps.
Yeah, exactly, because there are a lot of apps that have been around for a while. Like Facebook, I think, is like all Objective-C still, but
really,
yeah,
wow.
At least the main app. But like I'm sure like they'll eventually get on Swift as well.
Let's talk a little more about your talk.
Yeah.
So you presented a really interesting solution to some common localization challenges.
Yep.
Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so one of the first projects I started working on when I joined Workflow was localization, because this is something that we've been wanting to do for a very long time. And I guess our team hasn't really had like enough people on the team to like take on like localization and like internationalization and all that. So I started working on that. There's this command called genstrings that we can use to like generate the localization string file, but for us, like there are some quirks that made that incompatible with what we wanted to do.
Right.
So we were like, okay, I guess we have to write our own script. And I was like, oh, like we can do it in Swift.
Nice.
Like at Venmo, we did something similar for I think generating code for image assets in Swift. So I was like, oh, we can do like this localization thing in like Swift as well. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Cool.
Yeah, it's like scripting is a nice way to introduce your team to Swift without having to add Swift code to your app itself. Because I think a lot of big apps have concerns because of like ABI stability and like your app binary size is going to increase and all those sorts of like other issues that we might face. So it's a nice way to add Swift and get your team like used to it without having to like go like full in. Yeah, it's like kind of easier way.
Dip your toe
Yeah, exactly.
in there.
And then you'll really like it, and then you'll like go swimming in the pool. Yeah.
There was a really funny example in your talk where you were showing how the Japanese word choto gets translated, and it sort of, to me, it was a really good example of how it's hard to deal with these cases in which the literal translation differs from the translation in context, and it's kind of hard to preserve that context in an app. or when you're writing localization code. So how do you do that? How do you preserve context?
Yeah, yep. So Choto was like an example in like, I guess, spoken Japanese, but in our app there, when we had our translators start translating some of the strings that we extracted out of our app, there's this word slack in our code base and our app, and some of the translators started translating it literally to like slack on a rope, even though we wanted it to just be like Slack, as in like the app that everyone uses to talk to each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, one lesson that we learned there was, even if it seems like obvious to us that it's like Slack the app, we need to make sure we provide that context in our localization strings.
Right,
Yeah.
and you would put it in like a comment. Or
Yeah, exactly.
in the comment, property. Do you think of yourself as having a specialty within iOS? Or are there certain kind of problems that you find yourself naturally drawn toward?
I think I keep kind of like changing. So the scripting example that I gave in the talk, I used to be completely like uncomfortable with scripting because I associated it with like languages that I wasn't familiar with, like Ruby and like Python. I did it in school, but like I wasn't that comfortable with it. And a lot of scripts are written in Bash, which is like really scary looking to me.
Yeah.
But as soon as Swift came out, like I think because Swift can be used for like so many different things, it's been kind of like pushing me out of like my comfort zone, like beyond just like, oh, like UI programming and also like modeling things out like in the code base. But yeah, it's been great. I'm hoping that like because Swift is available, or people are starting to write Swift for like backend code too. Like backend code is something that I'm also not comfortable with. I'm hoping that it will like make me branch out to like other stuff too, like maybe like front end web development in Swift.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I feel like I do have specialties, but I want to like branch out, and Swift has been like a great way to branch out.
Nice. Yeah, it's so cool that you can love a language and then all of a sudden you find yourself doing these things that
you discover like all these like different aspects of engineering that I've never done before.
Yeah. All right. We have some questions from students. This one's from Jeremy Beasley. He's in our beginning iOS nano degree, so he's a true beginner. And he asks, when during the design and development process would you recommend someone consider localization of an app? At the beginning, the end, or throughout the entire process?
I'd say throughout the entire process. I think every time you add a user-facing string, it's nice to be like, oh, I should make this a NS localized string, because as someone who just joined a new team and a new project 5 weeks ago, it was really hard. So we actually didn't label any of our user-facing strings as NS localized strings. So I was literally going through the entire project trying to figure out like which ones are user-facing as opposed to like which ones are like identifiers or like URLs, like things that shouldn't be localized. So I think it's just easy to just do it as you go. Yeah, it's kind of like picking up trash as you go, but except more positive and active. Yeah.
So you basically had to go through every string in the app and analyze whether it was user facing or not.
Yeah, and oftentimes I had to ask the rest of the team like, hey, like, is this one user facing? Like, is it going to break things if I change it? So yeah, like as you add strings to the app, is probably the best way to do it because it's so fast to just like add it. You just wrap the string in an NS localized string, and it becomes so much easier. And then that's like the internationalization part to like make it localizable. But in terms of like actually localizing and translating the string itself, I think that can wait until like later when you like need to do it, like when you actually want to go international and start translating. So I think that part like depends on like what your situation is with like your app. It's like if it's like really successful and you want to take it to like different countries, or maybe it's like not that successful and you want to like find like different markets for it. Like maybe that's when you want to start like actually localizing and translating. But in terms of like marking your strings as localized strings, I would say as you go. Yeah.
Nice. And I guess your translation strategy is probably going to differ based on what countries
exactly. Yep.
Your market includes. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between internationalization and localization?
Definitely. Yeah, I confuse the two terms as well, but internationalization means getting your like app ready for translation, basically. So for example, like things like marking your strings as localized strings or making sure like you handle like different like units of measurement, or maybe your UI should support like right to left languages as well. That's also internationalization. Yeah. I guess that's also kind of localization, but the localization part is usually like the actual translation and the act of translating all of the strings to different languages.
What tool do you guys use for translation?
We use this platform called Crowdin, and it's really cool because they provide this really easy to use like dashboard for you to collaborate with translators. If someone's confused, they can like start like a little like chat, like dialogue thing. So it can be like, oh, like what's the Slack thing? Like, oh yeah, it's the app, not the other thing. Yeah, and what's cool about that platform is that they also, I forgot what the feature is called, but they let you like kind of like open source your translation, so you can like host like a website with like the translation dashboard, and you can literally have like users just like crowdsourcing and starting to translate your strings, and you can have someone that like actually approves the translations. But
that would be super useful, since things like cancel and done and delete and all those common actions would be just taken care of immediately.
And then for like native speakers, like even like the longer paragraphs are easy for them to translate. So like maybe they're bored and want to translate like one string or something. But if you have a lot of like users who just want to like do like a little bit of translation, you'll end up with like a lot of translation, which is awesome.
So cool. Let's see, we have another student question. This one's from Leo. Leo's in our iOS nano degree. And he says, how do you step out of a rut? I've been working on a bug for the past 3 days. I've done all that I can think to fix it, but it still won't work. I feel like I need a different approach to tackle this problem. Has something similar ever happened to you?
Yeah, definitely. Wow, sometimes I'm working on a bug and I'm just like, nothing is working. What I usually do is I go online or like try to find someone who might be able to answer my question, and sometimes like even if they can't answer it directly, like they'll like say the right words or something to like trigger like another idea in your mind. So I think like going outside of just like you and your workstation and like talking to other people, or like reaching out to like people on Twitter or maybe Stack Overflow, like that usually helps for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah, and even if somebody doesn't have the exact answer you're looking for, it's still going to be useful.
Or you just like talk to someone, like the rubber duck thing.
Yeah.
It actually works.
Have you done it? Have you talked to the rubber duck?
Not to like an actual rubber duck, but like to like teammates, yes. So can you like sit and listen to me for a little bit?
So that's all the student questions. A lot of our students are true beginners. This is their very first programming language is Swift. Do you think Swift is a good programming language for total beginners?
Yeah, so the thing that excited me most at the keynote was the Swift playgrounds for iPad, and on the way here today on the BART, on the train, I was like coding something on my iPad that like let me drag around like a Swift bird logo on my iPad, and like drawing a circle that's like draggable and stuff. So I think I can see that like Apple's really pushing for like the educational aspect of Swift, and people are starting to write books that are, instead of paper books, they're like interactive Swift playgrounds. And like I honestly like wish Swift were my first programming language, so I could have learned like programming on my iPad instead of like boring sorting algorithms on like the whiteboard or like index cards when it's cool. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, the graphics are so cool.
Yeah.
The interactivity, the like coding keyboard.
I know, like, and it's available on like the developer portal, so anyone with a developer account can just go there and get it installed on their iPad. So I think I recommend like anyone and everyone to try it out if they can.
Yeah. I want my little cousins to
download it. And like the iPad minis aren't like too expensive too, so I think it's awesome. Like getting a MacBook is like really pricey and like an investment. And honestly, I think if I weren't like a developer, like I wouldn't even own a laptop. I would just use an iPad. So
cool. Well, thank you so much, Ayaka. That's all the time we have, but it was so cool getting a chance to talk to you and getting a chance to see your talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.